Hello and welcome to our final webinar in the Cybersecurity Chronicles webinar series. My name is Alexa Tahan, and joining me today is Vishal Sahay, who is the head of Managed Security Services here at Nokia. Before passing it over to Vishal, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. All participants will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. There is a Q&A feature, and you can enter your questions at any time in the chat box. The webinar will be recorded and a copy will be made available shortly after. Today, we're discussing strategies to address the cybersecurity skills shortage. Many organizations are realizing that it's not a matter of if, but when a cyber attack will happen. Leadership teams across the industry are discussing what can be done to protect their organization, and many are realizing the pool of cybersecurity talent is quickly diminishing. Vishal will now discuss the challenges that we face, some best practices to resolve, and how Nokia can be a trusted partner along the way. I'll now pass it over to Vishal.
Thank you, Alexa. So, before we start, right, the challenges the industry is facing with respect to the cybersecurity skill gaps, let's put throw some light on the alarming statistics around it, right? So, as per the recent, I would say, statistics from Cybersecurity Ventures, by the end of, say, 2035, right, there would be around 3.5 million unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs, right, which is, I would say, enough to fill 50 NFL stadiums like that, right? And this clearly shows that organizations are really fighting a very uphill battle, right, against cyber threats, right, incurring more breaches, in need of these skilled professionals, and continuing to struggle to fill these key positions. At the same time, right, it's also important to understand that the reasons, right, behind it. So there are multiple factors, right? And Alexa, if you just go to the next slide, I think, yeah. So here we try to understand the factors which are driving the cybersecurity skill gaps, right? So on one side, where the compliance mandates attributable to security and data privacy are getting more and more stringent day by day, there are three key shifts that what we are observing in the industry, right? And these shifts are around technology, the attackers, and the threats, right, which are introducing more challenges in the security defense layer. So we see adoption of new and disruptive technologies, which are changing human lives and bringing new business models. But on the flip side, this also introduces new kinds of security threats which cannot be addressed by the traditional ways of managing security. And there are changes in the types and the motives of attackers as well. So even when we look into the attacker space, even they have evolved from a non-serious attacker to organized hackers to hacktivists to state-sponsored attackers, and in many cases we see examples of cyber terrorism as well, right? And the attackers now have hugely contributed towards bringing a drastic change in the threat landscape in the fray, using increasingly sophisticated arsenals, making the traditional security measures obsolete. And to counter these threats, right, there are too many security technologies and products in the market, which are very dynamic, changing in a very short periodicity, right? And this is something which is making the security solutioning and designing of security solutioning for a given organization more complex. So at the end, what you need is a very diverse security skill sets to counter these threats. And because of these dynamic threat landscape and the solutions which are changing at a very fast pace, this is something which is adding to the problem.
Wow, thank you, Vishal. That was a really great visualization to understand just the larger impacts that the shortage will have. So, moving on, we know that roles will change over time. Can you share some of the implications of the skills life cycle?
Yes, and that's a good question, right? So, let's try to understand that because of all these aforementioned factors, right, what we just discussed, right, cybersecurity skills has also a life cycle, right, which mainly shows how skills for the top cybersecurity roles are evolving over time, which skills are declining, which are on the horizon. It's basically to drive more effectively the skill investment decisions. And the life cycle again has different attributes, starting from new skills, emerging skills, growing core, and the ones which are declining. So let's spend some time on understanding the details and the nuances around these different attributes of this life cycle, right? So when we talk about new or the emerging skills, these are relatively very new, right? That were earlier in a very small percentage when we go a few years back, but now have increased enough to catch our attention, right? But it requires organization to plan to upskill such talents in a very fast pace, right? So very often these skills are sought as the role evolves, and availability of these skills is likely low, driving up competition and the cost. So the market leaders, right, who are into such a space, right, are more likely able to afford such a skills and thus create more demand in the market, right? The next, when we come towards the growing skills, right? So these are the skills with a very high growth rate and are on the way of becoming the core skills. So those such skills used to be optional, but now becoming increasingly important to the talent profile, right? So current hiring and upskilling strategy need to be adjusted to incorporate such kind of skills. And organizations who are not focusing on such skills for the role are at a risk of falling behind, right? And therefore, these skills are driving the evolution of the role itself. The third category, if we look into the core skills, right? And these are the prerequisites and essential for any job, right? They are presented in a very high percentage, but upskilling and hiring of such core skills are essential, right? To take them towards growing and emerging, right? Last but not the least is the declining skills, right? So these are the skills with the, I would say, as the technology is getting obsolete, so the associated skills associated with that technology also go towards and shows a declining trend, right? And these are the candidates for deprioritization, right? So while these skills are still important for the role, they will become less relevant in the near future, right? So significant investment in these skills is something which is not advised. It is important to identify the talent segment of risk of becoming redundant, and we need to determine options for reskilling them, especially in the growing and the emerging areas, right? And this is something which is applicable to all kinds of cybersecurity roles. Now, all these examples, right, it's also important to understand from some real life examples, right? So if you could just go to the next slide. And here I would try to give an example of, say, identity and access management role, right? Which in fact have seen a lot of evolution in terms of the skills and the capabilities over the period of time. And let's try to understand this in context of telecom, right? So we see that as we are moving from the legacy telecom technologies, like from 2G and now the modern one, which is 5G, we, we see a huge, I would say, change in the threat scenarios, right? So while many of these technologies are adding multiple, bringing more business models and new cases, changing human lives as well. But at the same time, we have to see that what is changing from the threat perspective, right? So first, right, due to and if we talk about 5G specifically, right, due to exposed interfaces and APIs, due to virtualization and cloudification of the network, the attack surface is increasing significantly, right? There are dramatic increase in the number and types of access, right? So it's not only about user accessing the system, but there are multiple and different kinds of system accessing each other, right? So there are 3GPP network elements, there are non-3GPP network elements, and within these two, there are trusted, there are untrusted. So there are multiple permutations and combinations, right? And then there is huge expansion in number of VNFs and the NEs, right? And we know that network slicing is also bringing more complexity in terms of its administration, and there are risks associated with it, right? And last but not the least is the protocol evolution. So as we are moving from a closed protocol stack to an open protocol stack, right? So by saying this, it doesn't mean that 5G in fact has multiple security vulnerabilities. In fact, 5G and these technologies has much, I would say, robust security mechanism in place, right? But in order to sustain that, and in order to ensure that those features are not tampered with, there are certain skills and some measures that need to be taken, right? And let's try to understand with respect to the IAM, identity and access management space, right? So like any enterprise, right, identity and access management space with these open architecture has also opened up, right? And it's not about just managing it within a closed environment, but now in an environment where everything is open, right? And as a result, the digital identity now has a very wider definition, right? It has become a center point of everything from authorization to service enablement to securing data access and so on and so forth, right? And therefore, in order to counter all these challenges, there are skill enhancements which are required in the IAM layer, which it cannot just be executed in a manual way. What it requires today is bringing automation, multi-factor authentication, convergence of logical and physical identities, identity federation, zero trust, privileged identity management and access management, then a specific solutions to address cloud native solutions and softwares, and application of artificial intelligence and blockchain in the IAM layer to make it more efficient towards addressing the such threats, right?
Wow, thank you, Vishal. And with all of that being said, would you consider the skills gap now a threat?
It is indeed a threat, right? So, see, when we look into the cyber security implications, for example, any implications of cyber security, if it is not implemented effectively, we know. And I don't want to probably get into the details of that. But what is important to understand, and as I have mentioned earlier, that the cyber criminals are constantly evolving their tactics and techniques, right? And exploiting new vulnerabilities and targeting sensitive data and systems, right? And without enough skilled cybersecurity professionals, right, who in fact have a capability to predict, prevent, detect, and respond to such kind of an attack, right? Organizations are bound to face significant losses, damages, and liabilities, right? There are many examples which are in public domain, which talks about the financial losses, incidents, and breaches, which in fact have happened in different industries, different sectors, right? One of the reports from IBM that says that the average cost of data breach in 2020 was around 3.86 million, and it took almost 280 days to identify and contain it, right? So these figures are improving what we see towards in the IT side. But when we look into the operational technology, for example, in manufacturing or in telecom, it's still a very big challenge, right? So without going into the details, right, what is important to understand here that the organizations need to ensure that they follow the best practices and the guidelines for acquiring the required skill sets for data protection, privacy, and security to meet the expectations of their customers, partners, and the key stakeholders, right? However, without enough skilled security staff, the consequences could be financial, it could be reputational, it could be legal, there could be operational disruptions. It could lead to an IPR theft, a loss of competitive advantages, and in some cases, right, and with the kind of use cases which even 5G intend to support, right, through ultra reliable low latency communication and massive machine to machine communication, there could be a risk on human lives as well as to national security as well.
Wow, that is very interesting just to take a quick view into some of the consequences that this can have. Thank you so much for explaining. And what would you say the next steps are to address this shortage?
Yeah, so see, there are many solutions to this, right? But if you would ask me, I think I would focus on top five, right? The very first is it's very important to first stay informed and updated of the emerging threats and technologies in the field of cybersecurity to ensure that the skill development efforts in an organization are aligned with the current needs, right? So that's the very first, right? The second is all about understanding your own business, right? The technology roadmap and how you intend to use security as a business enabler. And then to identify the skill sets which are required to fulfill the same. So that is all about keeping an eye on the desired state where we want to be, right? And once we have that visibility, the third step is to do a very clear mapping of emerging, growing, core, and the declining skills, as what we discussed in the previous slides, which are relevant to your organization and business model, right? The regular skill gap assessment to identify the specific gaps and plans to bridge those gaps with a clear investment plan. So it requires a level of investment as well, right? And then once this, the last but not the least, the very important factor that looking into the diversity in the cybersecurity skill sets, it's very difficult to build all the skills within the same organization, right? So it's very important to come up with a strategy that which all the skills to be insourced and what are to be outsourced, right? And then to build an ecosystem of a trusted technology and service partners which can support you with the required skills just in time, right? And to the ramp up the internal skills, some of the common methods I think could be which could be easily applied, like there are multiple very good certification programs provided by different certifying bodies. There are online courses, webinars. I think the organization also need to develop the in-house training program for which are very specific to the needs of the organization, right? Cross training, internship programs, then simulated red and blue team exercises. These are some of the measures like which I think could be adopted to ramp up these skills internally.
Yep, those are excellent strategies. Thank you, Vishal. That can help really limit the impact of the shortage. Now, lastly, I just want to ask, how has Nokia helped to address this skill shortage in the telecom security domain?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, right? So, you know that when we started this journey, right? Initially, if you just go a few years back, there was a wide space as long as the telecom OT security is concerned, the operational technology. And when I say operational technology, what I mean is the radio transmission core, interconnect, and so on and so forth. That part of the network across from 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, and the fixed line technologies, right? So, when we look into a telecom, I would say environment, right? There are two kinds of network which runs in parallel, right? One is the IT or enterprise network, and the second is the OT part. While the solutions around the IT and OT evolved at a good pace in the industry, and there were multiple MSSPs offering such solutions, somehow the same was not happened with the operational technology, and that was a sort of a white space, right? And then we started observing that point that the attacks in the telecom OT space has significantly increased and is still increasing, right? So when we started this journey to bridge this gap, it was sort of an uphill task, right? And the reason was that there was no ready solutions which were available in the market, and the skills of bringing the telecom and the security skills at a common place was also not existing, right? But with a very clear cut strategy of a skill gap assessment, as I explained in the previous slide, launching a talent hunt program both within the organization and also from outside, right? And then cross training the resources to bring the telecom and security domain expertise together, setting up the Cyber Excellence Center for a constant R&D to support the R&D activities around the telecommunication technologies to build the right solution and right use cases for threat detection, response, threat prediction, and the recovery strategies as well. And also, we designed the cyber attack simulation exercise in sort of our lab environment, right? So with all these such initiatives, we build the much needed technology assets to address telecom specific security needs. And this includes building the right security portfolio specific to the needs of telco, not only just limited to the IT security needs, but also towards the telecom, building the right, I would say, threat detection and response capabilities through our Global Security Intelligence and Operations Center, and then integrating automation, usage of artificial intelligence, machine learning in making these security operations more effective in addressing all these challenges, right? So this is just a small, I would say, summary of what Nokia, in fact, have done to build this capability and establish itself as one of the leaders as long as the telecommunication security is concerned.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vishal. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. This is such an important topic that cannot be an afterthought. To everyone who tuned in, please enter your questions in the Q&A box. We will follow up with you individually to address them. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.